Imagine you are 20 years old, living in the most powerful nation on earth. You have access to the finest education money can buy. You have connections at the highest levels of government. You are physically strong, intellectually brilliant, and socially positioned to become anything you want to be. The most powerful man in the world is essentially your grandfather. His throne, his wealth, his legacy, all of it within reach. This is not a hypothetical. This is Moses at 20. Acts 7:22 tells us he was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and deeds. He was, by every human measure, extraordinary. Historian, poet, philosopher, military general, legislator. Ellen White says he stands without a peer in all of these, and he walked away from all of it, not because he was forced to, not because he failed, but because something, or someone, had recalibrated what he considered worth having. And then, 40 years in the desert, alone with sheep and silence and God, no palace, no title, no audience, and out of that desert, the most humble man who ever lived. Today we look at Moses, not just the burning bush, not just the Red Sea, but the internal journey, the pride that had to break, the humility that had to grow, and what it looks like when a person decides that God's calling is worth more than everything the world is offering. We've been in a series on pride and humility, looking at where pride comes from, what it does to our relationships with God and others, and what genuine self-knowledge looks like. Today we look at the most concrete example the Bible gives us of a person who chose humility. Not as a personality trait, but as a deliberate, costly, lifelong decision. Moses. We'll look at Hebrews 11:24, 26, Numbers 12:3, and several key moments in Moses' life. We'll also sit with the hymn, I'd Rather Have Jesus, because its words capture exactly what Moses' choice looks like in musical form. And we'll ask the honest question this lesson puts directly to each of us. If someone were to describe you, would they include humble or meek on the list? Not a comfortable question, but an important one. Let's begin with the man himself. Point 1. The choice. What Moses walked away from. Hebrews 11:24-26 describes Moses' decision with three powerful phrases. By faith Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. For he looked to the reward. Three movements. Refused, chose, esteemed. He refused the identity Egypt was offering him, the title, the lineage, the prestige of being Pharaoh's grandson. He chose something that looked worse by every visible measure, suffering with a group of enslaved people rather than comfort in a palace. He esteemed, considered, weighed, valued the reproach of Christ as greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. Notice that word, esteemed. This was not an impulsive reaction. It was a careful evaluation. Moses looked at what Egypt was offering, all of it, at its best. And he looked at what God was calling him toward. And he made a judgment. The treasures of Egypt lost. Ellen White describes just how extraordinary this was. As historian, poet, philosopher, general of armies, and legislator, he stands without a peer. Yet with the world before him, he had the moral strength to refuse. The world was before him, and he refused it. That kind of choice doesn't happen by accident. It happens when someone has seen something, or someone, that makes everything else look small by comparison. Point 2. The breaking. 40 years in the desert. But here's something we easily overlook. Between the palace and the burning bush, there are 40 years. 40 years of obscurity. 40 years of tending sheep in Midian. 40 years of no title, no audience, no influence, no recognition. Why? What happened? Exodus 2:12. In a moment of righteous anger and deeply impulsive action, Moses killed an Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew slave. He thought no one saw. He was wrong. And suddenly the man who was mighty in words and deeds was fleeing for his life. That impulsive act cost Moses everything. His position, his platform, his self-confidence, his self-sufficiency. In one moment, he went from the most powerful young man in Egypt to a fugitive shepherd, and for 40 years, that's where he stayed. Here's the truth about those 40 years. They were not wasted. They were essential, because Moses had to unlearn Egypt before he could be used by God. The palace had filled him with self-reliance, self-confidence, and the assumption that his abilities were enough. The desert emptied him of all of that. With mountains as his classroom walls and silence as his curriculum, God was doing something in Moses that could not happen in a palace. He was replacing Egypt's version of greatness with heaven's version. He was replacing self-sufficiency with God-dependency. He was replacing pride with humility. Not as a performance, but as a deep, settled, genuine reality. By the time Moses reached the burning bush at 80 years old, he had no confidence in himself at all. When God told him to go back to Egypt, Moses said, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" Exodus 3:11. The man who once was mighty in words and deeds said, "I am not eloquent. I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." Exodus 4:10. This is not false modesty. This is the result of 40 years of genuine humbling. Moses knew himself. He no longer trusted himself, and that, paradoxically, made him exactly the person God could use. Point 3. Numbers 12:3. The most remarkable title in Scripture. Here is one of the most remarkable verses in the entire Old Testament. Now the man Moses was very humble, more than all men who were on the face of the earth. Numbers 12:3. This is not a peripheral character being described. This is Moses, the man who stood before Pharaoh, the man who parted the Red Sea, the man who received the 10 Commandments on Sinai, the man who spoke to God face to face as a man speaks to his friend. And his defining characteristic, the thing the Spirit of God chose to note about him, was not his power, or his miracles, or his courage, or his leadership. It was his humility. The greatest leader in Israel's history was its most humble member. That is not a coincidence. It is a principle. The most effective leaders in God's kingdom have always been those most aware of their dependence on Him. Because the moment a leader starts trusting in their own abilities, their own reputation, their own track record, they have stopped being a channel for God and started being an obstacle to Him. Moses knew this. He had learned it in 40 years of desert silence, and he carried that knowledge through every miracle, every confrontation with Pharaoh, every crisis in the wilderness, not as someone who was naturally meek, but as someone who had been thoroughly humbled and had chosen to remain that way. Point 4. What happens when pride enters? The moments that could have gone wrong. Consider what Moses' life and leadership would have looked like had pride crept into any of its key moments. At the burning bush, a proud Moses might have negotiated his terms, or used the encounter to rebuild his lost status. Instead, he took off his sandals and hid his face. During the plagues, a proud Moses might have taken center stage, positioned himself as the hero of Egypt's downfall. Instead, he consistently pointed beyond himself to the God who was acting. At the Red Sea, a proud Moses might have savored the moment, the dramatic pause, the raised staff, the crowd watching. Instead, the narrative shows a man focused entirely on getting the people through. When manna fell from heaven, a proud Moses might have taken credit for provision. Instead, he consistently redirected gratitude toward God, receiving the 10 Commandments. A proud Moses might have descended from Sinai as the spiritual celebrity of the age. Instead, he returned as a servant. And then, the moment where pride did briefly break through. Numbers 20, the rock. Moses struck it in anger instead of speaking to it as God commanded, and in that moment said, "Must we bring water for you out of this rock?" The word "we." Moses claiming partnership in a miracle that belonged to God alone. And God said that because of that moment, Moses would not enter the promised land. One pronoun. One moment of pride claiming God's glory. The lesson is sobering. Even the humblest man on earth had to guard against this. Humility is not a destination. It is a daily choice. A daily surrender of the self's persistent desire to claim center stage. Point 5. I'd rather have Jesus. Moses' life in a song. There is a hymn, I'd rather have Jesus, whose words capture exactly the choice Moses made 3,000 years ago. I'd rather have Jesus than silver or gold. I'd rather be his than have riches untold. I'd rather have Jesus than houses or lands. I'd rather be led by his nail-pierced hands than to be the king of a vast domain or be held in sin's dread sway. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. Moses could have had silver and gold, more of it than almost anyone in history. He could have had houses and lands, palaces, actually. He could have been the king of a vast domain, or at least the heir to one. He chose differently, and the choice was not made once. It was made every day, through every temptation to reclaim what he had given up, through every moment of crisis when self-reliance would have been the easier option. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. That sentence, lived out over 80 years of active service after 40 years of preparation, is the biography of Moses in 17 words. The question the hymn leaves with each of us is the same question Moses answered with his life. Is that true of me? Would I rather have Jesus than the things Egypt is offering? We've been talking about Moses throughout this lesson, but I want to zero in on one specific moment that I think reveals his character most clearly. Numbers 12. Miriam and Aaron, Moses' own sister and brother, speak against him. They criticize his marriage. And then they say something more revealing. Has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? This is a direct attack on Moses' authority and calling, made by his own family, publicly. How does Moses respond? He doesn't respond. The text doesn't record a single word of defense from Moses, not one sentence of self-justification, not one reminder of the burning bush, or the Red Sea, or the plagues. Nothing. And it's immediately after this silence that Numbers 12:3 appears. Now the man Moses was very humble. The Spirit of God inserts that verse right there, as if explaining why Moses was silent. He didn't defend himself because he didn't need to. His identity and calling were secured in God, not in his own reputation. He didn't need to fight for his standing, because his standing wasn't something he was maintaining. God was. And what happened? God defended Moses. Dramatically, Miriam was struck with leprosy, and then, in one of the most tender moments in the entire story, Moses prayed for her healing, for the sister who had just attacked him. Please heal her, oh God, I pray. Numbers 12:13. The humble person doesn't need to defend themselves. God defends them. And then, freed from the need for self-defense, they can love even those who attack them. That is the portrait of biblical humility. Not weakness, not passivity, not self-deprecation, but a deep, settled security in God that makes self-promotion completely unnecessary. Let me bring Moses' story into your week. Think about the places in your life where Egypt is still making its offer. For some of us, Egypt looks like a career opportunity that requires compromising something we know God is calling us away from. For others, Egypt looks like the approval of people whose opinion has somehow become more important to us than God's. For others, Egypt is the platform, the audience, the recognition, the feeling of being known and respected, that we find ourselves quietly craving more than we'd like to admit. And for most of us, Egypt is not one dramatic temptation, it's 100 small daily ones. The small choice to take credit instead of giving it to God. The small choice to defend ourselves when we should stay silent. The small choice to position ourselves rather than serving quietly. The small choice to prioritize our comfort over someone else's need. Moses didn't become the humblest man on earth in one decision. He became humble through 40 years of small, consistent, daily choices. In a desert where no one was watching and nothing was impressive. Here's the practical invitation. This week, identify one area of your life where pride is quietly operating. Not dramatically, just quietly. Where are you taking credit that belongs to God? Where are you seeking recognition that isn't necessary? Where are you defending yourself when you could simply trust God to defend you? Name it, bring it to God honestly, and ask, as the hymn puts it, would I rather have Jesus than this? The answer, honestly examined, reveals where your heart actually is. And here's the grace. We can't be humble in and of ourselves. Sin is part of our nature, which is precisely why we need Jesus so much. He is not calling us to manufacture humility. He is calling us to receive it, to stay close enough to Him that His humility, which brought Him from heaven to a manger to a cross, begins to form in us, more and more, day by day. 2 questions and 1 exercise to carry with you this week. First, if someone who knows you well, your family, your co-workers, your church community, were asked to describe you, would humble or meek appear on the list? Why or why not? Be specific and honest. Second, where is your Egypt right now? What is the thing the world is offering you that is quietly competing with God's calling on your life? And the exercise, find the hymn, I'd Rather Have Jesus. Listen to it, read it, or sing it, and sit with the words as if Moses is singing them in the desert. Then ask yourself if you can sing them honestly about your own life. Moses was not naturally meek. He was mighty in words and deeds, the kind of person who kills someone in a moment of passionate anger. But 40 years of God's schooling, 40 years of desert silence, 40 years of choosing the lowest seat, produced the humblest man on earth. God is not asking you to be naturally humble. He is asking you to keep choosing Him. Over Egypt, over the palace, over the throne, day by day, choice by choice, and over time, like Moses. The people around you might just notice. If today's lesson spoke to you, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week we break down the Sabbath School lesson in plain, real language that anyone can understand. This week in the comments, what is your Egypt? The thing the world is offering that most competes with what God is calling you toward. You don't have to be specific if it's personal, but I'd love to hear from you. Next week we continue this journey into humility and what it looks like when Jesus Himself models it for us. Don't miss it. Until then, I'd rather have Jesus.